Pygame is really just a fairly thin wrapper around SDL. And SDL is a simple direct media layer. It's a C library for interacting with the screen, a graphics library basically, and an input library. So it also lets you read keyboard and mouse and joysticks and things like that. And Pygame also has some sound support added into the mix, but those are all really thin wrappers around the graphics libraries and sound libraries and stuff like that. And they don't really have anything like a game framework has. So the Pygame doesn't force any structure on your application. So you are completely free how you write your code. You can have main loop, you can have no main loop, and some kind of a reactor from Twisted or something, and process events, or don't use events, check the keyboard every time. And because of that, it's really hard for the new people to start making games with it. Yes. Okay. Sorry. It's really hard to make games with it because you don't know where to start. There is nothing more scary than a white piece of paper, right? And write something or draw something, and you have no idea what. The second thing that happens is that you start making your game and you make a really, really bad architecture. So you just slap things as you need them. You put all the controlling code inside the sprite itself, and generally you end up with a mess that kind of works, but it's very hard to maintain and very hard to extend. So that's why Pygame is a fine tool if you know how to use it. And there are a lot of libraries that actually use Pygame and give you some more structure. But I wouldn't recommend using Pygame to a new game developer. And what should we use? So from what I know, there is Pyglet, which is a little bit more structured. For example, it forces a main loop on you. It has some scene management, at least a skeleton of that. And unlike Pygame, it's accelerated. So it's actually fast on modern hardware. Whereas Pygame still uses the techniques from the 90s, where you push individual pixels to the screen. So it can be a challenge to write a fast game in that. What else? There is Cocos 2D, which is based on Pyglet and adds a lot of this structure to your game. So they have a lot of libraries that already give you the map, for example, or give you the scene management, or give you twinning, animations, sprite management, and stuff like that. So that's probably a very good starting point. There are a lot of tutorials. And Cocos 2D also has version for the iPhone. It's for the Objective-C, so the code is not really portable, but the API is similar. And at least there is a lively community around that. So that's another option. What else? There is the Blender game engine, which is mostly for 3D games, and it's mostly for... It's nice because you can do stuff in Blender and then animate it with Python. Or do stuff in Python and make Python generate 3D objects and stuff like that. So that's also quite nice. There is Panda 3D, which is also 3D, obviously, and which is a C++ like Blender, but also scripted in Python. But I don't really know much about that. I know that there was a tutorial about Panda 3D last year on EuroPython. I even attended it, but I didn't pay attention to it, so I didn't really learn much. So sorry about that, I can't tell you more. maybe you have other suggestions, or you have something more to say about game development. So.
Yeah, are you? Can I just take your place? All right, thank you. So sorry to interject like this, but I could talk for hours about this topic. I just managed to say just two things. So I was just going to point out that really Pygame is like last millennium technology. It's kind of wrap around libSDL, which is C code, and it only does 2D actually. The nice difference, the main difference with Piglet is that Piglet is actually a wrapper over OpenGL. So you basically can do 3D as long as you have accelerated hardware and stuff. And then there's a whole story around Cocos, which is very interesting, which is because the name comes from a small Argentinian city where a colleague of mine, Lucio Torre, and another guy put together Cocos based on Piglet there. And then what happened was that there's this other guy, which is Ricardo Quesada, which actually made a business on top of it because he maintains a number of different Cocos 2D ports. Like you said, there is an iPhone version, but there's also Cocos 2D-X, which you can use C++ on it. And then there's also a JavaScript version. So you can actually use Cocos to write games which are in the browser. Obviously, there is not Python anymore, but it's JavaScript. But you still have the same architecture. So if you use Cocos with Python, you basically get experience and games which are easily portable on different platforms, which is quite nice. And the last thing that I want to say is that since I'm very much interested in audio and sound stuff, there is this bad situation in Python nowadays that we basically, it looks like we do not have a wrapper over OpenAL, which is the main API for audio. But actually there is one. It's also very, very well hidden inside Piglet. So if you go and download Piglet and then install AVBean, which is a binary thing that's used to play audio and video, and then you look into the examples of Piglet and see there's a thing which is called Soundscape, which is very nice virtual audio interface where you have a listener and 4 musical instruments and you move stuff around and do sound mixing in space in different directions and stuff like that. And that uses an OpenAL wrapper which is built in Piglet, whose documentation is basically 1 page with 6 lines of text. And that's all you have, which is kind of bad, but it's kind of workable. So yeah, 2 minutes, not bad. Thank you.
So anybody else can propose something or tell about his his experiences or something like that? No? Okay. Maybe you?
Well, I don't exactly have any examples or anything of the sort, unfortunately. Nobody actually brought up Kiwi. But I really don't know that much about it myself, so...
One moment, I just... there is another thing, when you want your game to work on mobile phones, you basically... There is a Pygame subset for Android, which is kind of nice, the RenPy. Right. Okay, too many ideas at the same time. So the RenPy guys wanted to port their Pygame-based framework to Android. So they ported a big chunk of Pygame and made it work on Android with some modifications. So your Pygame game won't work on Android right directly, but you can add some small changes to them to make them work. And then you can actually make a binary and put it on the Google Play, for example. And there are several games like that are already there. So that also works. But what works even better, because is Kiwi, which I think there was some talk about it, or at least a poster session about Kiwi, which was initially for creating user interfaces, but right now it's actually pretty good at doing interactive graphics. So games are basically interactive multimedia applications. So
Just want to say a few words about Kiwi, because I've used the Kiwi for just a simple like arcade gaming, to create few arcades game. It actually works in Android and iPhone pretty well, but it's still using the Pygame. If you want to install it somewhere in an isolated environment, you will probably fail. This requires some development. I tried with the build out, I failed. And there's a guy from Kiwi somewhere in here. I will ask him to help me to finish this project. Yeah, so it's quite amazing framework which has a lot of great UI, which is really easy to handle. But you still have to use Pygame. So I know it's basically works in there, it's stable, but I believe we don't have much alternative from that. Yes.
So there is another thing. If you really want someone comes to you and says, "Okay, I would really like to make a game, but I can't program. But I would want to start making something. I have great idea for a scenario, for a plot, for an adventure game. And I have all the dialogues and all the characters in my head. I just need something to make it run." Then look at RunPy. RunPy is an engine, a game engine for building interactive fiction games, basically, graphical interactive fiction games. So they are like those, I don't know if you have seen those Japanese games where you have manga characters that have a lot of dialogues, and once upon a time you have a menu where you select your next action, like go to the game or invite that girl for a dinner or something like that. And lots of them are hentai games actually. So, but not just that. There are in Japan. There are very popular, and they have very involved plots like books, and sometimes even more because you have a lot of choices, so you can explore much wider area with that. And RunP is really a professional framework. It's built on top of Pygame, but you don't have to write any Python. You just write the dialogues and the choices, and then you have like labels you can jump to when you make selections. So it's really easy to start. You have to draw the characters and the backgrounds and things like that. But of course, you can use some ready ones or just steal them from the internet if you don't plan on selling your game, of course. Or use them as placeholders and replace later. And you can write Python in there if you want to have something non-standard. And that's also nice because you can start with something completely simple and then add some additional stuff when you need that. And it's a great way to really start making something, to finish something, because that's the hardest part when making games, to actually do something to the end and have something to release. So that's a big recommendation. What else can I recommend? About tools, what tools to use? For example, for graphics, personally I use GIMP because I like GIMP, I'm used to GIMP, but I can imagine that a lot of people, when they see GIMP, they just switch it off instantly because it's not a very friendly user interface. So I have found a really nice editor for pixel sprites that's called Pickle. It works on Windows and on Linux because it's written in Adobe Air. And yeah, that's kind of sucks. But it's really well done in the sense that it has exactly the things you need for pixel art and nothing more. It has even some previews where you can create the walls for your game in a way that they connect in the right way. And then it shows you preview if they really connect right. So Pickle is a nice editor. And if you want to make maps for your games, and those games are, for example, top-down games or platformers, Of course, you can just put them in a text file and then try to edit that. But there is a great editor for game maps. It's called Tiled, Tiled probably. And it has bindings for all the popular game frameworks. It has bindings for Python. It has bindings for Pygame specifically. So that's very useful because you don't have to write all this logic. And it supports layers of the map, layers of tiles, auto-tiling, a lot of nice things that are already there, and you can make the map. You can tell someone else to make the maps for you, and they don't have to learn your strange format. It's just what you see is what you get. Okay, that's that. For sounds, because it's a lot of games, or a lot of indie games don't have sounds because they are hard to make. It's very hard to record a sound clearly and then to cut it clearly and then remove any noise from it and stuff like that. And there is a tool that's called BFXR. Like FX is like for effects, and FXR is because of flicker and things like that, and B is because it's a second version. So BFXR, and it's basically a sound effect generator. It gives you a lot of small knobs that you can turn and try to generate various game effects like the sound of the coin from Mario, or a laser shot sound, or an explosion, or a scream, or things like that. And it's really easy to use because you just click on random until you get something that sounds quite what you want. And then tweak it a little bit with those knobs to get exactly what you need. And it just saves a WAV file, wave file, so it's easy to use in any game engine. It's not written in Python, but it's a web application, yeah? Oh, I see, okay. Well, Flash and Adobe Air are kind of popular among game developers for some reason. And what else can I recommend? Okay, so I said that the hardest part of making a game is actually finishing it. And for that, because I know a lot of people who say, oh, I'm reading the game of my life, it will be awesome when I finish it. I'm already reading it for 10 years. And that's not a joke, they actually are. But because they come with new ideas, and every week they say, oh, I completely changed the idea of my game. It's not going to be a platformer, it's going to be a first-person perspective shooter. So it happens when it takes too long, right? That's why you should really start making small games that you can finish in like a week or a weekend. And the best way to do that is to take part in game jams. There are a lot of game jams. There is, for example, Ludum there, which is a 48 hours game jam. You have 48 hours to make a game from scratch and post it on the website. And they play all the games and vote on them and stuff like that. But the important thing is when you have a deadline, you really plan for something small because you want to finish it in that deadline. And then you have something finished. And there are many games that actually started on a jam. Do you know World of Goo? That game was, I think it was for Pi Week or something like that, for some game jam, where the theme was gravity or something like that. And the guy had this idea. he tried. He only made a couple of levels, I think 2 or 3 levels, and submitted that game, and people like it very much. So he started to expand it and to work on it some more. And today it's one of the top-selling indie games in the world.
I absolutely need to add something about that because that's one of my favorite games, and I think that Kyle Gebler is an absolute genius because he's the one who designed the game, who made the visuals, who made the sounds and the music. And what you really need to do if you even like the music of World of Goo even a little, you need to go to the World of Goo website and download the soundtrack. It's down there, it's free downloadable, it's uncanny music, and you really want to listen to it again and again and again.
Actually, about this music, when he started to work on that game, he wanted to have bolero in there. Because he had this dream of people coming out of the houses, carrying furniture and things and stuff and building a tower from them. And then going back to their homes and bringing more stuff. And then when they ran out of the stuff, building the towers with their phones. Like a strange mania, and in the background of this dream, he heard bolero, Ravel's bolero. So initially, thank you. Initially, it was this music. Later, they changed it, and it changed for the better. So, but kind of interesting story. There was a question back there. Oh, not anymore. It seemed. Yeah. Okay. And if someone of you have something more to suggest, please. Okay.
Actually, I mean, the way you describe to create the music is complicated. It's probably if you record it. I mean, with the microphone and the live instruments, yeah, it's complicated. It's a sound engineering. It's another art. But there is like programmable music, and actually I've got the 2 examples. First of all, it's of course the trackers, which you can create the 8-bit music. I mean, like the old school for Sega and Nintendo, if you remember. And this is quite easy to learn. The most popular is the fast tracker, but there is a port for multi-platform port called Milky Tracker, I think. It's really beautiful. So you just program music in there. So all you need to know is basically a scale. And it's easy to learn. There's plenty of tutorials. I've used that one. And another method, it's only available on the Mac, called Impromptu, which is also open source, and you create music with a Lisp language. So you can like plug any VST plugin in there, and you just like writing the algorithm for the sounds, and usually it's quite psychedelic stuff, but it works, and it's everything open source, both of them.
Then there is also PD, pure data. Well, maybe also good for like programmer type of people.
Yes, I think we have to wrap it up and start and let other people use this room. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you for all of your suggestions. Sorry if it wasn't very informative. It's all that I have right now. And see you on the next EuroPython maybe.